Former Fox News host Pete Hegseth has been the U.S. Defense Secretary for 3 months, but that is apparently time enough for more than enough upheaval. The most recent came Thursday with the resignation of Hegseth's chief of staff, although there's nothing to suggest that Joe Kaspar's departure was anything but voluntary. But U.S. media reports describe growing turmoil inside the Pentagon. Hegseth has fired a number of senior commanders and aides and has reportedly threatened to use polygraph tests, that's right, lying detector tests, to identify internal leakers. He is also the subject of a Defense Department Inspector General review over his handling of classified information through the encrypted messaging app Signal. Hegseth reportedly bypassed Pentagon security protocols by setting up a private internet connection in his office to access Signal. He used the app to share details of planned U.S. military strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen before the operations were carried out. I want to bring in now Liz Hempowicz. She's Deputy Executive Director of the NGO American Oversight. Her organization has filed a lawsuit against Hegseth and the Department of Defense, alleging violations of the Federal Records Act and other government transparency laws. Liz, it's good to have you with us on this Friday. If you could, tell us what specifically prompted American Oversight to file this lawsuit.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you. What prompted us to file our lawsuit? Well, what we saw was a deliberate effort by senior Trump administration officials to erase the public record of what they were doing on behalf of the American people in real time. That is illegal. It is dangerous for democracy. And in the original chat that sparked this controversy, it risked national security and the lives of men and women in uniform. So to us, it was a clear violation of the Federal Records Act. And so we are suing to enforce the law and protect the public record because apparently officials in this administration clearly don't care to do that.
Well, let's flesh that out just a little bit. Why is the use of Signal or other encrypted apps by government officials such a serious records issue under the Federal Records Act?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's not about the use of any specific app in government. It's about how those communications apps are used. Mm-hmm. And if they're being used in a deliberate effort to manipulate or erase the public record as they were here, that's illegal because it creates an accountability black hole where government officials make decisions with real world consequences in total secrecy. And so nobody in the public should be okay with that.
And in this particular case, how significant is the fact that the chat included Hegseth's family members? I mean, does it change the legal argument about record preservation when your mother and your brother are also in the chat?
Well, I think it certainly would make it really difficult for the government to argue if, down the road when we are likely arguing whether or not they should be released under the Freedom of Information Act, that was information that was pre-decisional or anything like that. If there are people outside of government included in these chats and in these decisions and going into these decisions, then it would be really difficult to say that it was just government information in there and it was pre-decisional. But really, I think what it ultimately says is that this information is not secure. And we know that already. So it's not telling us anything new, but what it is telling us is just how blatant this administration will be in its disrespect of public records laws and the policies and procedures that they are supposed to be following to protect public information, sensitive information, and even classified information.
What are you hoping the court will order here beyond just declaring the record subject to law? I mean, are you seeking penalties, preservation orders, or are you seeking something else?
Yeah, well, the court has already ordered preservation, and that has forced agencies to admit that records were destroyed. So we are asking the court to do what Marco Rubio and Pam Bondi haven't done, despite their legal obligation to do so, which is step in and prevent further damage to the public record. So we are asking the court to continue to enforce these standards.
And Liz, what are the risks to public accountability when officials use these kinds of apps for sensitive discussions? I mean, we assume everyone uses them, everyone knows the risks, but I mean, just tell me, when we're talking about accountability here, what are the risks?
Yeah. Yeah. Accountability starts with records. When public records are deleted, we lose public trust because we
Hmm.
lose the ability to hold officials accountable at all. So name your kitchen table issue: the economy, healthcare, national security. Accountability for government action starts with those records. So without
Hmm.
them, the public loses any meaningful way to understand how decisions are made. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, the public loses any hope that there will be accountability down the road, because it is not often that you see accountability in real time. Here, we are lucky to have some of that, but that is not generally the practice. And so that is why we rely on the preservation of public records and federal records, so that watchdogs, courts, and others involved in this accountability infrastructure can hold decision makers accountable for the decisions they make in the public's name.
Yeah, we see how easily we could erase the past if we wanted to with this type of technology. And do you believe that current federal records laws, are they strong enough to handle the way communication happens in 2025, or are there gaps that Congress needs to address?
Well, the short answer is absolutely not. They're not strong enough, but they do exist and they should be followed. So there's no doubt that there's an increasingly complex communication landscape that makes it harder to enforce public records laws. This is not new. Agencies are facing a crisis of compliance, in part because they don't have the resources to address the rapidly evolving communication infrastructure landscape, and bad actors are taking advantage of that. And so, until a majority in Congress is either willing to hold bad actors accountable or able to change the law, it is up to watchdogs like American Oversight and the courts to enforce the existing rules aggressively.
Yeah, and your work just shows records matter, and they can't matter if they don't exist. Liz Hempowicz of American Oversight. Liz, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.